Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Over Beer. I'm your host, Tom Meyer. It's a simple format on Game Over Beer. Our guests will choose 3 beers and 3 games and tell us why they mean so much to them. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to our official partners, Four Quarters, the UK's original arcade bar, home to authentic retro arcade machines and consoles. Now, joining us this week on Game Over Beer is Robin LeBlanc. She's an award-winning beer columnist, author and podcaster with over a decade of experience in writing about the ins and outs of the beer world. In addition to her regular contributions in multiple publications, she currently works as a beer columnist for Metroland Media and is the co-host of the Ontario Craft Beer Guide, the podcast. We talked briefly about the beer scene in Canada compared to the UK and the US, before moving on to some classic beer selections and one of Robin's games which I'm pretty sure would have been on my list, so we geek out on that for a bit. So without further ado, join Robin and I as we Game Over Beer. Hello Robin, welcome to Game Over Beer.
Hello, glad to be here.
Great. I wanted to start off by asking you, obviously you're from Canada, and I wondered if you could start by telling us what the craft beer scene is like there compared to, say, the UK or the US.
Yeah, it's been really interesting following the Canadian craft beer scene, for the past, 10 years that I've been writing it, because, when I first started looking at the scene more, I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people considered where we were at in terms of trends and just overall experience was about probably, 5 years behind America.
Right.
But now, things have it's totally shifted. I mean, breweries have grown in my province of Ontario. I think we're up to, more than 400 breweries now.
Wow.
At least in terms of entities. We've become incredibly well represented internationally. We've won a bunch of World Beer Awards recently, which has been a lot of fun. And it's like there's no specific style people hang with, and it's sort of like I guess you could call it kind of a mini America in that sense, where
right.
And I guess parts of England as well, where we're just all doing different styles all the time, and it's kind of chaotic and kind of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for giving us that insight. And without giving away the beers that you've chosen, it has a distinctly European theme, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Right, yeah. So I think first up, I was going with beers that, myself and your listeners could enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I'm in Canada, and importing and exporting isn't as isn't as strong as it would be in America,
Yeah.
So I went with 2 fairly common European beers, because frankly that's all we have access to in the LCBO right now, thanks to the lovely pandemic.
Right.
Some of the more adventurous stuff is kind of not there. I could go with some English stuff, but I have a feeling I'd get laughed at, because all we really got here is Fuller's. I think we had an access to Timothy Taylor's Landlord, which is fantastic. It reminds me of being up in Grimsby with my family.
Oh, lovely.
But I have a feeling I'd get laughed at by the beer nerds there. So I went with some strong beers that were as formative to me as the video games that we're mentioning. Particularly one of them, because I do have a story behind it. I went with games that aren't necessarily new wave and impactful to the current modern day, but still ones that I gravitate towards too, because it was formative to me back when I started.
Yeah. Great. And how hard was it choosing those games?
Oh my God, so freaking hard. So goddamn hard to choose the games, because you don't want to leave anyone out.
Yeah.
And and there's so many that I wanted to include, because I got to do just very quick special mention on 2 games that unfortunately didn't make the cut, and but were on the list. One of them was Firewatch,
right,
which is just a great sort of nature exploration game where you're only talking to one person. That's sort of a lifeline, and you both get caught in this cycle of fear and paranoia as weird stuff starts happening around this camp. And the other one is Celeste, which is a great game. It's a challenging game. It's a forgiving game.
Yeah.
And it's not really a spoiler here, but it's a great sort of story on depression and coping with that. And I think I hit that game at a time when, the message really helped. And it's one of the few games, too, that I just like going back to when I do it over. But yeah, so these games, I guess without naming them, but I mean, they were incredibly incredibly formative to me. Like at least like one of these games definitely is like encoded in my personality. I fully credit with absolute shaping me, and we'll that'll be the bigger one. We'll talk about that later. Yeah. And, you know, one of the others, and then there was another too that, like, I only got to play within the past 5 years or so, right. And it just changed. It led me to appreciate gaming. So these still have, these ones have the biggest impact on me, I would say. Yeah. But figuring it out was hard, so... Yeah.
No, it's great you mentioned Celeste. That's a game I've just started playing, and yeah, it's just blown me away. It's also great to have these games that, you know, there's all these open world games and things like that, but going back to that kind of 8-bit music and graphics, and as you mentioned, like the links to depression there, and you know, as I'm playing it, I'm like, wow, these themes in a game are amazing. Obviously, this game didn't make the cut, so we shouldn't go too much into it.
No, but I will say though, like, to the readers, even though this one's not being highlighted, please do, play Firewatch. Definitely play Celeste. Yeah. It's on consoles. But if you get it for PC, there is like a huge modding community that has just created brand new levels, wow. And it looks fantastic. So go do that. Yeah. Those are two great games as well.
Right. So yeah, let's get started and let us know what the first beer is you picked.
So the first beer I picked, you know, it's Chimay Premier. It's the red cap.
Lovely.
And that was just, it's like I said, these ones are going to be pretty, you know, not wowy, but a big impact for me. Yeah. And Chimay Premier was the beer that got me into beer.
Right.
It you know, before then I enjoyed wine. I enjoyed learning about wine, but really I had no interest in, you know, the alcohol industry and not so much like in beer itself. You know, occasionally I would have a Guinness, a Fuller's, or, you know, what we had here was like Heineken and Rickard's Red, which was just sort of like a basic run-of-the-mill red ale. Right. But I didn't really care for beer. And I'm at a friend's house, and their roommate shows up, just, you know, who just got back from Quebec, because like back in, oh god, I think this was like 2009-ish, 2008-ish. Yeah. Things were still pretty slim pickings, but Quebec was where you would get like all these weird, cool, crazy Belgian beers. Right. And yeah, so my friend's roommate came by just like, hey, I just got this beer, you've got to try it. And it was a small bottle of Chimay Premier, and we tried it, and like upon first sip, it was like nothing I had ever tried before. Just the complex flavors, the depth, you know, the dark fruit notes, the just sort of nice sense of burning alcohol in there, and it was just it was lovely. And the only experience I likened it to was wine, but it felt more complex than wine. It was just absolutely delicious. And that led to wondering where I could get more. And that led to going to craft beer bars, where here in Toronto there was only one, and that was Bar Volo. And that led to going there with friends, where, you know, we would just sort of like pool our funds and do like mass bottle shares for hours on end. It would be a lot of fun. And that led to wanting to learn how beer was made, which then led to me getting all this information and being like, I need to put this somewhere. So I started a blog just to really keep my thoughts down. And then I put my head down and then lifted it up, and suddenly I made a career out of writing about beer and won several awards for it. So Chimay Premier was the beer that kicked that off. So that's why I like mentioning it and talking about it.
Yeah, so it really was the gateway beer into a whole career.
It absolutely was. It was.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried this. I was lucky enough to be in Belgium. I think I was on a press trip. These guys were just bringing all these different beers over, and obviously there's so many beers with so much fruit in it and things like that, and it was just all so different to me. Mm-hmm. And then I remember this one coming through, and like you said, it was those complex flavors. Yeah, it just blew my mind. I was like, what is this? Because obviously we had all these different bottles on the table. I was like, sorry, which beer is it I'm drinking right now? Mm-hmm. And then grabbing the bottle and then properly looking at the label and be like, right, okay, I'm making note of this one. Out of all these beers, this is the one I'm noting down. Yeah.
No, I love, because everyone has a different beer that sort of kicked things off for them. I mean, I know, you know, a lot of times too, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale gets a lot of credit, and you know, just other stuff like that. But I mean, no, it's good when everyone just sort of has that aha moment. It's just like, oh, there is actually better stuff out there than what I was previously led to believe.
Yeah, and that's a great beer to have as your first as well. You know, it's almost like when you start talking to people about the first band you saw. Mm-hmm. You know, some people cringe about, you know, who they saw, and you've got this amazing story to be able to say, yeah, Chimay Premier, that was my first one.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I guess in terms of musical, that's like busting out, like, oh god, any musical legends. Like, I don't know, you know, I saw Ravi Shankar, you know, as my first concert, just like, what? Or the The Who or any of those, so.
Yeah. Great. So that brings us on to game number 1. What did you pick?
Game number 1. Okay, so before I name the game, I have to take you back in time.
Insert sound effects.
This will be the early part of 1996, and my family were getting accustomed to the new sort of family computer. So, like, my parents both had computers, but there was never one sort of central family one that, like, I could use, because theirs was work stuff. So they got a central computer, and that was an IBM Aptiva, which normally the came in sort of like a bulk thing. There was no like sort of custom thing. It was all just sort of like you get the tower, you get the mic, you get everything that comes with it. Yeah. I looked at promos. It said it came with Windows 95. It didn't. It came with Windows 3.1 and DOS 6.3. Windows 95. I don't think I got that until much later. But yeah, so I think like one of the fun things about it was a terrible computer, by the way. Like it was just one of those ones where like you access AOL. It was 56K modem in the 90s, so it was like 10 minutes to get a picture that wasn't a great quality picture. The computer itself came with a LucasArts bundle, and there were some games that I never ended up playing, which I think was like Star Wars Squadron or something like that, and I forget the name of the Indiana Jones one, but I think the graphics just never really appealed to me.
Right.
But one of the games that was part of that bundle was Day of the Tentacle.
Right. And
that was the first one that I gravitated towards too. Yeah, I started playing that, and I guess I'll talk a bit about Day of the Tentacle. How do I even describe it? So it's a sequel to a previous game called Maniac Mansion.
Right.
Yeah, Maniac Mansion was like one of the OG adventure games, the point-and-click adventure games. And this was just sort of an update of it, but with like a lot more humor into it, a lot more adventure and action, all that stuff. Yeah, basically you had these 3 characters who are going to save their friend. So and their friend just happens to be a disembodied tentacle. Okay, I think I got to start from the beginning here a bit. So yeah, the whole game starts off that there are 2 disembodied tentacles. Those are from Maniac Mansion originally, and they're wandering around the Maniac Mansion, which is Fred Edison, the Edison family. So they're wandering around the mansion of that, and it's owned by Dr. Fred, and it's just this has, because of whatever it's doing, is just spewing out toxic sludge into the river. And the 2 tentacles are walking up to the sludge. One of them's purple, one of them's green, and purple tentacle just says, "Hey, I'm thirsty. I'm gonna drink this." And green tentacle says, "Please don't." And the purple tentacle ignores it, and the purple tentacle then, after drinking it, grows arms and becomes incredibly evil and becomes set on taking over the world. So then, moving to a different direction, you've got three friends. A nerd named Bernard, a medical student named Laverne, who's sort of like a bit weird, bit wiry, and a rather large roadie named Hoagie. They're living together, and they get a note from Green Tentacle saying, "Hey, please help." So they go over, and the very first thing you've got to find is you've got to find Dr. Fred, who owns the house. You've got to find his lab and free the tentacles. And then you free the tentacles, and you realize that was the wrong thing to do, because purple tentacle is horribly evil.
Right.
And then it just turns into this massive time travel story, where you eventually end up playing all 3 characters, Bernard, Laverne, and Hoagie. And you've got to put a stop to purple tentacle's plans.
Right.
And yeah, you do that in the distant past, which I think was like the time of like George Washington. And I think that's where Hoagie ends up going. And then you go to the present, where that's where Bernard is. And then Laverne goes to the future, where Purple Tentacle has enacted his plans and has enslaved the human race. And tentacles are now, the leaders of this. So you've got to go through all 3 times and figure things out. Yeah, it's sort of weird to talk about now that I'm actually thinking about it. But the puzzles were fun.
Yeah.
This just taught me about the fundamentals of a point-and-click adventure game. That like if you get this thing and you combine it with this thing, you can do this, and then you can get the thing that you're after. And then that thing could be used towards something else. I had never played anything like that before. But before then, it was all just games like, Mario. Mario was the big ones, or even like the other stuff like from the Atari, which is like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, stuff like that. So I had never played anything that had a huge story, that had like a massive cast of characters. and that actually had some sort of soul to it, you know, that was actually funny. Like there was so much humor in this and so much striking animation, and striking art and fun music, even though it was like fairly basic, but like fun music that just kept me engaged through the whole thing. And I'm know what, Skirt, I'm not ashamed to say it. When I first played it, because I was so unfamiliar with point and click adventure games, the very first thing you've got to find is Dr. Fred's lab, which as I said, but it's a hidden door, but it's a fairly simple thing to find because you're only stuck in one room. And I was stuck in that room for a couple of days, mainly because like when I would play, it would usually be after school and like half an hour from when I got back home from school to whenever dinner was, you know? So I didn't have much time to begin with, but I just remember just like mindlessly clicking anywhere I could, except the one obvious area in the center of the room, I should add, where this door was. But eventually I found that, and then eventually I sort of like started learning the rules. And I think playing that game, because like I said, I didn't have much time, and also like to my credit, I was 11, and it took me, I want to say it took me like maybe 6 months in total to finish the game. Yeah, and I think once I finished that, I felt this huge, great like sense of accomplishment. You know, I felt so damn good. I was riding high on that feeling for like a week, and I thought just like, okay, wow, this is a new form of gaming that I've never experienced before, and I really love this.
I don't want to spoil what's coming up, but the game you're going to talk about later,
yeah,
that's what happened with me in terms of gaming. That feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of playing something completely different. And as you say, you know, playing Mario where, okay, there's a little bit of puzzle elements at time, like how do I get from A to B? Like,
yeah,
you know, I need to jump here, I need to do that. But this game, you really had to think, and it was that first time like, oh, I can't just cruise through this game. I really have to think, and I have to pay attention to what people are saying. And as you're saying with the items, like, right, I've got these two items. Oh, I can put them together. That now creates this. I now need to use that somewhere. Yeah, for me, it was an eye-opener of how games could be. And as you say, that strong dialogue and all those other elements where you didn't have in a Mario or in a Atari game.
Like looking back at old adventure games of that time too, you know, like this one, the other one that we're going to be talking later in the episode, and, you know, stuff like Monkey Island, like a lot of the LucasArts stuff, as well as like, it strikes me how like the 90s point and click adventure games were like also massively unforgiving in ways, because like how the hell would you know to do this and combine this? But eventually like you figured it out, because I feel like these games weren't as popular, so there wasn't really much of a, you know, like it's not like you could, you know, open up a magazine and find cheat codes or something like that, or get, you know, a guide for it. You were sort of left on your own. You could possibly look it up on the internet, but not many people had the internet back then, and not, you know, certainly like my 11-year-old brain didn't think to look on the internet for how to play it, you know.
Great. Well, I think we should swiftly move on now to beer number 2. What did you choose?
Beer number 2. So like I said, we went with a European theme, but this one is a European beer that's based in Toronto, and for good reason. So this beer is from Godspeed Brewery, based here in Toronto. And I'm fortunate enough that it is I want to say 10-minute streetcar ride away from me.
Right.
I am going to go out on a limb and say that Godspeed Brewery is perhaps one of the best breweries in Canada.
Wow.
They're fantastic. Their brewmaster, Luc Lafontaine, who often goes by Bim, he is just, I don't know how to describe him, but I mean, like, he just has so much passion, so much talent. He got his start in Quebec. He worked as a brewer at the DCL for a while. Then he moved to Japan to start a brewery there, and then came back because like he wanted a place of his own, and he started Godspeed. I think he wanted that initially sort of like as his playground, you know,
right,
where he can hone stuff and celebrate the beers that also he wants to drink. And I think it threw a lot of people off at first, because I don't know if a lot of the English scene is aware of DCL, but like both in America and in here, DCL has a huge reputation, you know, namely for some of their, I want to say like big beers, their imperial stouts and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people were thinking DCL. Okay, so when Godspeed opens up, DCL is going to be a DCL 2 essentially. And it wasn't that, because Bim's just like, I just want to drink the beers that I want to make the beers I want to drink.
Right.
And a lot of those are lagers. So as years went on, like his skill only deepened, and then something formative happened for him where he went on a sort of a trip with other breweries to the Czech Republic.
Right.
And he just absolutely fell in love with the style. It's like he just absolutely loves it. He comes back and he says, "Know what? I want to recreate this, and I want to do it right." And not just make a Czech lager, make an authentic Czech lager, and several authentic Czech lagers. He did just that. So yeah, that was back in 2018, I want to say. And yeah, that trip was hosted by the Czech American Embassy and the Canadian Consulate Economic and Trade Sections, I think something like that. And yeah, so he just kept learning, and then he started working with the Czech breweries, and then he started working with the Czech consulate.
Wow.
And just nailed these recipes. And one of the first beers to come out of that was something I would argue is their flagship, which is Světlý Lezek 12 Degrees, which is just Czech premium pale lager. And I don't know how to describe it other than it's perfect. It's to me, it is absolute perfection. It's just got this nice amount of dryness, beautiful grassiness. It's crisp. It's wonderful. And I will say too that at the start of the pandemic, when things were just feeling a little too isolated because everything was locked down, I really wanted this beer because I enjoyed it, and I just wanted to celebrate things that I was enjoying. I ended up having just enough money to make a special order for it.
Right.
And I had I want to say I want to had about 8 or so, and it was just perfect. I credit that beer with getting me through the first leg of the pandemic. It's such a good beer. And honestly, I think, look, if any of your listeners, please go to Toronto, make it a point to make your first stop Godspeed Brewery, because you've got so many good stuff there. They've got the Yuzu Citrus Saison green tea IPA, but they've also the Dortmunder is fantastic. The Baby Svetli, which is actually a low alcoholic version of the Svetli, which actually tastes good. It's a low alcohol option that tastes good, which I never would have thought. Yeah. The Potmavi Lezek, I know I'm mispronouncing these, I'm sorry. They did an interesting one too, which was called a Kintsugi 1, which was a barrel-aged mega blend of 3 of Godspeed's beers, which I think is Okami, Okastrama, and Yuzu, and blended it with West Avenue pressed apple juice and mixed fermentation Saison. And it's spent 3 years in an array of expressive Chardonnay in this cidery's heritage funk cider barrels, and then matured for an additional year in stainless before conditioning in bottles for 5 months. Wow. And it's beautiful. I mean, Godspeed is beautiful, but Světlý Lezek 12 is just that is a beer that I credit with getting me through the first leg of the pandemic, and is just an overall one of my favorite beers ever.
It's so weird. You talking all about this just makes you really want to come over and try it. And it seems bizarre to have the thought of going all the way over to Canada to try a Czech lager.
Right? Yeah. But it's just one example of, and it's something that I think is kind of unfair, but I sort of understand it, is that Canada has world-class stuff. Our scene is really cool. Ontario in particular. Yeah. A lot of incredible world-class beers that are worth trying and worth coming over to try. I understand that the relationship between America and the UK is a lot stronger in terms of getting the beers, but I there's a reason why I've written about my local scene so much. Yeah. It's because I really love it, and there's just a lot of good stuff out there.
Oh, there we go. So if anyone's heading over to Canada, definitely check out what you've been writing about the local scene, so you could really hit those spots.
Yes. But yeah, Godspeed, do it.
Great. So let's move on to game number 2. What did you choose?
Right. So I just talked about a beer that got me through the first leg of the pandemic, so I'm going to talk about a game that got me through the first leg of the pandemic.
Perfect pairing.
Exactly. So these start to make sense a little bit, because these start to make sense because there's a bit of a theme there. The first beer, the first game, and likewise with the Světlý and the Yakuza 0. Yeah, I went with the Yakuza 0 because I think it was a game that came out in 2018. I didn't get to it until 2019. Played a little of it, and then just life hit, and then the pandemic hit, and I found myself with a bit more time on my hands. I'm like, okay, you know what? I want to continue to play this game. And Yakuza 0 just blindsided me with how good it is, because and it made me realize that I think I did I think I did the Yakuza series dirty in previous years because like Yakuza series has been happening since like I want to say the early aughts, and every time I looked at it, I think I had the same thought that a lot of Western folks did, which was like, oh, it's essentially Grand Theft Auto Tokyo.
Right, yeah.
And I didn't resonate necessarily with those games back then. So I just left the entire series alone, and it kept going, and it was always like there in the background, but I never really held any interest just because I had these preconceived notions about it that as I learned ended up being wrong. So Yakuza 0, it is a prequel to the entire series. It has been argued that like it helps if you have played, I guess now all six of the main games involving this one main character who is Kazuma Kiryu. It helps if you play those games, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Like there's just going to be some things that you just don't get, and that's fine. But I mean, I wanted something that was fairly approachable, so I checked out Yakuza 0, and yeah, it is a prequel to the games. I think it's set in, I want to say the late 80s, probably like 1988, 89 in Tokyo, and right from the get-go, it just blew me away. From the very first scene, I'm just like, oh, this is not GTA Tokyo. This is actually a very compelling story. And yes, I've since learned that the Yakuza series, the way I describe it is essentially a Japanese soap opera in a game.
Yeah.
You know, and like it's got a gripping story. You've got cutscenes that are like, it can go as far as 10 to 15 minutes long in these cutscenes. Like it's so captivating, and I got so many hours of enjoyment out of it. And and in this one too, it follows two characters, Kazuma Kiryu, who's the main character of the Yakuza series, you know, up until the recent one, which was Like a Dragon, which actually that's also a good game. But this one follows Kiryu, and usually a non-playable reoccurring character in the series who is now playable, Goro Majima. You know, when you first see him in the first Yakuza game, he's pretty insane and kind of a crazy character. And this game is before that, so you deal with his struggles as well. So I don't know how to describe the story without actually, one, spoiling stuff, and two, just sounding like a raving mad woman, because there's just so much that goes on. I can't condense it, but it actually got me to rethink video games in particular, and I was so invested in this, and it still took so long to finish, that I want to say it got me back into gaming, because I had been going through a bit of a slump and not really playing much. Yeah. You know, like occasional Destiny with some friends, or, you know, the occasional, you know, bit of retro stuff, but
nothing to sink your teeth into.
Not a whole, nothing to hugely sink my teeth into, and nothing that like I felt that I could accomplish, because like it feels like a lot of new games too, I mean, can be a bit intentionally difficult, and you know, sometimes I don't need that. Sometimes I want something that I can just sort of go with the flow with, but also feel a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, like I love Dark Souls to death, but some days you don't want Dark Souls, you know? So
no.
But yeah, so this game was fantastic, and I think it spoiled me for side quests.
Yeah.
This was a problem that I had with a lot of games, still have a problem with a lot of games, is that if you go on this game with this big open world, you know, and I'm talking about like, you know, your Fallouts, I'm excluding New Vegas in this one because New Vegas is a perfect game and we just leave that alone. Yeah. But like your Fallout 4, or I love the Spider-Man game, but I'm including that as well, and just, you know, a bunch of others where the side quests are essentially the same. Go get the thing, oh no, something wrong has happened, you have to beat them up. Go get the other thing, then come back and we'll thank you and give you some money. And that's it. And there's like nothing to it. There's almost like sort of a perfunctory repetitiveness to it. The Yakuza side quests, yeah, some of them are, please go get the thing, or, you know, it usually does result in some sort of conflict and all that stuff. But there's genuine human stories in there, and it's so quirky. You know, sometimes, actually one in particular that I keep thinking about, which I think is just so clever and funny, is you see a businessman outside of a bar, and some drunks are hassling him. Right. So you go there, you confront the drunks, which is, you know, I beat the crap out of them. And the guy thanks you, explains that he's an economist, and he wants to buy you a drink. And, you know, as a sign of thank you, they get talking, and it turns out that this economist is supposed to come up with a plan on, you know, what to do about the Japanese economy. He decides to ask Majima, as a sort of like everyman, what he thinks should be done about the Japanese economy. And you get to pick a view, and all that stuff, and your thanks. And it seems like a quirky kind of weird thing to do, but then you actually start to think that like this was around like late 80s. That was approaching the time when the economic crash in Japan hits. So the joke is that Goro Majima contributed to the economic crash in Japan.
Which means you did, because you chose the option.
Which means you did, yeah. And it's just fun, Another one too, where like you're trying to convince this woman's father that she has a boyfriend, so you're posing as his boyfriend, and it's just like there's some silly stuff in there, and there's some silly characters, but a lot of it has absolute heart. And those side quests just sort of stick with you until all the way through the series. I'm currently playing the 7th in the series, which is Yakuza Like a Dragon. There's a lot of side quests, and a lot of them, like one legit made me cry just because it was so sweet. Oh. And yeah, so like the Yakuza series in itself just really spoiled me for good side quests and compelling story.
There's so many points there you make that I relate to. That first instance where you're saying you saw the series, you knew it existed, it was there, but you never got into it.
Yeah.
For me, I just didn't know where to start. Mm-hmm. I felt like, right, it's too late for me to get into this series. I'm not going to understand anything that's going on. Yeah. And then Yakuza 0 comes out and everyone's saying, right, if you've never played any of these games before, yeah, here's a good game to get into because it starts before the other game. So, here you go. Yeah. So that's the same. It's my introduction to the series was that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you start playing it and you do have that thing of like, right, this is just, as you say, like a GTA Japan. Yeah. But then you start playing, you get further into it, and yeah, that substance that you get, you remember the storyline a lot more here than you would a GTA game. And as you say, those kind of soap opera twists that you get in the game as well, like you realize that you're really invested in these characters and in the story, which you'd never get with GTA.
Yeah, exactly. And like the games can be an absolute slow burn. Frankly, I love that about it. It's an extended soap opera, but you also like you get a feeling for that world, and you get immersed so easily into it. Yeah. Immediately from the get-go of Yakuza 0, you're suddenly becoming aware of all these Yakuza factions and all of their interrelationships and the dynamic there, and who's trying to screw over who's trying to befriend who, and yeah, who can be trusted. It's a game too that like also keeps you on your toes, because like as big as the story gets, as complex as the story gets, there have legit been moments where like a particular reveal happened, and I had to put my remote down and just say, "Oh my god!" Like because you're so invested at that point, yeah. And you get genuinely surprised because it's great, and I'm pleased to say too that feeling that holds up so far from what I've played of the Yakuza series. It definitely goes in with Like a Dragon, which I was admittedly a bit nervous about because it's a new lead character. Yeah. And obviously everyone is a bit concerned of like, well, how am I going to relate to this guy? And literally within half an hour of playing, I'm just like, oh my god, this guy's my brother. I would invite him over for dinner,
Yeah, the last point I'll make on this game, from my point of view, is what you related back to those mini games and those side quests. Mm-hmm. Is just how almost got to a point where I was like, is there two different teams working on this, and are they competing to see what people can enjoy more, the story or all these side quests? Because the side quests were just as crazy and as exciting and fun to do as the main story.
They were. The side quests make you want to 100% the game. Yeah. And I've never played a game that made me want to like fully 100% it. I love this game. I love the Yakuza games so much. And yeah, Yakuza 0 was my first exposure to that world, and I just had to... I've got to play them all now.
Yeah. Great stuff. So let's move on now to beer number 3. What did you choose?
Beer number 3. So this one's another one which like it's not particularly groundbreaking, but it's mine. Weihenstephaner, the Hefeweizen. Right. Again, it's solid, and I think that where Chimay Premier was the beer that like got me into beer, this Hefeweizen was like the one that like I would drink a lot of, let's say. Yeah. One that sort of is
like a fridge filler.
A fridge filler, ingrained in my taste, especially on a hot summer day. Is something that I love drinking, and it's a beer that it's like it's fairly straightforward. Fairly straightforward hef. It's just like banana, clove, some hints of orange in there. It's nice. It's hazy. It's it's got all of the staples of it. It sets a standard. And yeah, it captures exactly what I want in a beer in, like, say, the summer.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to have a beer like that. And I think that the reaction that it takes out of me is something that I look for in other beers. You know, of course, like, not... It can be a different style. It can be different tastes and all that stuff. But I want I like a beer that makes me want another one.
Yeah.
As we all do, I guess. But I mean, like, yeah. So I think it sort of like set the tone for me as a beer that I just enjoy drinking and what I'm looking for when I drink other beers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, you know, speaking about the first beer that you picked, you know, she made premiere, and how I was talking about, the first time I tried that and being like, wow, all these new flavors.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we took my mum to Berlin for her birthday, and I didn't even think about, I was young then, I didn't really think about what kind of styles of beer there'd be out there. And, we just go to a bar and order, just something from the taps. And this was one of the beers that was served, and we're just like,
yeah,
wow, once again, just mind blown. Like, as you say, the banana, the clove, and being like, wow, this is completely different to what we have, for us in the UK. What is this beer? And just, being blown away by those flavors and it opening my mind to, right, there's so much possibilities that beer can bring, so many different tastes. And this was that moment.
Yeah, and I think, like, it taught sort of, like, younger me an important lesson, too, is that, like, better beer doesn't always mean higher alcohol content, right? Like, you can actually have something that is pretty sessionable, or you can have several of and not need assistance to get home, So I think, like, it just hit all the marks for me. And like, what's more, too, is that, like, these beers were just readily available, like, a lot, Yeah. They've been around quite a long time, and... suddenly now that you're more aware of the world of better beer, you're realizing that these were options all along. And you can have something that works well with, like sitting by a fireplace and slowly sipping. Absolutely. But you can also have something that is just like on the patio during summer.
Yeah.
That you're just having over conversation. A beer that you can think, you don't have to think about it if you don't want to, but if you do think about it, it's good things.
Yeah.
And like, that's exactly what I want in a beer. And I definitely think Weihenstephaner was the first beer that did that for me.
Yeah.
And so I guess it encoded that into my sort of like ethos of beer, of what I look for, not as a journalist, not as a beer judge or something, but like what I appreciate personally as a beer drinker.
Yeah. Great stuff. And now this brings us on to game number 3. Now we've kind of been hinting at it a little bit.
Oh, geez.
But
yeah.
let everyone know what you picked.
Oh, I've been talking so much too that I'm preparing my throat to get through this one, because this one's going to be the bigger topic. So, like I said, in 1995, got the IBM Aptiva. There was a LucasArts pack there. The other game was Sam & Max Hit the Road.
Yay.
This game changed my life. Like it not only changed my life, it completely. I hold Sam & Max responsible for shaping who I am as a person, shaping my humor, shaping my outlook on life, shaping all of that. I blame Sam & Max. So the story about this is kind of fun. Sam & Max's creator, Steve Purcell. So Sam & Max started out as a comic in the 80s. Steve Purcell, living in California, he worked for LucasArts, and he was mostly a character artist. He would do storyboards, stuff like that. Also, when the newsletter came round, he would draw like little LucasArts sort of based like Sam & Max like strips for the newsletter.
Right.
Yeah, and when storyboards were being drawn up of games, but the character sketches actually weren't complete, Sam & Max would actually be the models for these games. So the higher-ups at LucasArts just ended up being like, why don't we make Sam & Max a game? itself. So yeah, hence Sam & Max Hit the Road was born. So those that are unfamiliar with Sam & Max, firstly, how dare you?
Yes.
Secondly, so they're a rabbit and a dog. It's a white rabbit. He's naked. This makes sense in the next sentence. And that's Max. And Sam is a dog, bipedal dog who is dressed up sort of like a, 1950s detective gumshoe. They are freelance police. So they're not police, they're freelance police. And they take on jobs from the commissioner. And the comics are pretty wild. We'll focus on the game first, because the game was where I first was exposed to them. Basically, it already kicks off where, you see them in action, where they rescue a young woman from a deranged mad professor. And they rescue her simply just by beating him to a bloody pulp. They remove his head. It's graphic. Not really, but like they remove his head, and then they drive away, forgetting to untie the young woman who was captured. And the beginning credits happen. They realize that the head is a bomb. They throw it out, all that stuff. Then the commissioner calls and says that there's trouble down at the local circus, where in the freak show, their prize attraction, Bruno the Bigfoot, who was frozen in a block of ice, has escaped. The ice is melted. Bruno is gone. Oh, there was also someone else missing, which was Trixie, the giraffe-necked girl from Scranton, I want to say. So they both went off, presumably eloped or something like that. We don't necessarily know. We gotta get in there. Yeah, so it's just crazy. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Like it's fun.
It's hard to describe.
It's hard to describe. It's 100% an experience. It finds you traveling all throughout America to just these crazy sort of like roadside attractions. Like you've got these tar pits, but then you've got like a giant ball of twine, that has a rotating restaurant at the top. You have like just a giant fishing place, like just a place with a lot of fish, but it's like got those rundown attractions. Like it reminds me so much of being young and going on road trips throughout America.
Yeah.
And I believe England's got some of these too, but I mean like just the stuff that like they have no business being public attractions.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. But they put in like a half-assed effort, and they're doing moderately well. Just sort of like not necessarily run down, but just like very kitschy, very cheesy, easy tourist trap kind of things. That's sort of a theme that sort of goes through all of the Sam & Max like properties you end up seeing. And it ended up like just really painting into me an appreciation for schlock. Just having the best time with, I guess, what you consider just sort of like cheesy, mediocre experiences because it's fun. I guess an example I would give here is that on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, we have a Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. But I unironically love this place because I go there, I get a margarita. If I pay extra $5, I can keep the glass. Jimmy Buffett's playing, and it's overall a bad experience for anyone who cares about that kind of thing. But it's fun. It's just a fun experience, and it's a fun throwaway experience. And I think we need more of those in life. And just in terms of the tone of the game too, as well as the tone of like I said, all of Sam & Max's stuff. And there was a comic that was a fairly long-running comic. I think you can get that collected nowadays. There was an animated television series that originally premiered on Fox Kids.
Wow.
This was back when Fox was making kids shows that had no business being kids shows. The humor is this bizarre mix of like dark and realistic, but also wholesome, because you're dealing with two characters, Sam and Max, who just are chipper throughout this entire thing. They're chipper and enjoying themselves and enjoying the experience, but they also have no illusions about the world, and what a harsh, cruel, and sometimes violent place it can be. And they're also violent and cruel in some cases too. But it's all part of this. It's that weird dynamic that ends up being absolutely hilarious. It's a humor that I've ended up encoding into myself as well. It's a humor that I deeply appreciate.
It's so funny because I think when we first spoke originally and you pointed out this game, I was like, oh my god, like this is probably one of the games that if someone asked me to pick games, this would be one that I would go to in terms of telling a story and seeing how how this game affected me. And it was kind of random as well, similar to your story, where so my parents split up and my dad lived in Israel and I used to go over and visit.
Yeah.
He had a family computer and I, could barely read Hebrew. But I just remember there was this kind of file. It had all different games in it. And I'd just click every day and just find new games to play. Mm-hmm. And then stumbled across Sam and Max Hit the Road.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I found this game and made note of what the Hebrew characters were so I could remember to go back to it. And I just remember playing so much of it. And, I was probably 12 at the time, I think, and it was the dark humor, the violence, and that kind of, I don't know, that joy you got from the craziness of it. And just, being that young and just seeing this game that was just creating these weird worlds and these weird attractions and things like that, it was just, mind-blowing for me. At that age. And
so I was about 11 or 12 when I played Sam & Max as well, and like I talk about Day of the Tentacle, and when I say that like that one introduced me to the world of point and click adventure games, and it was a pretty wild story and it was fun, But I feel like Sam and Max taught me what those games could do.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a basic understanding of the fundamentals of adventure point and click, so there was less franticness in trying to figure out the rules then, and more appreciation for just playing the game and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Where it resonated more with me was like, you know, this wholesome, fun sort of cartoonishness in the face of cold, hard reality of situations.
Yeah.
That allowed me to make a stronger connection with it, because like even at 11, you know, I was bullied a lot. I was pretty well traveled at that point and stuff as well. So I mean, like, I had no illusions about some of the world. So it still allowed me to see this optimism and this humor in these dark situations. And yeah, that's why I said Sam and Max Hit the Road was very formative for me, because it allowed that and just taught me what games could be, and also just like legit like, hey, I want to go to this gas station that has, you know, these pecan rolls. I absolutely love them. And also like one constant you see in the games is sort of a gas station convenience store / diner called Snuckies.
Right.
And that's actually based off of an actual chain, Stuckies. So it's barely even concealed. So Stuckies are still in existence, and they are known for their pecan rolls. And yeah, like it just little experiences like that. Like, hey, let's go to Stuckies. Oh, I love these pecan rolls. And that's it, you know? That's the extent of the experience. And there are people that take their job seriously. Actually, fun fact, the person who is at the counter at every Snuckies location you go to, sometimes it's just like without a mustache or a beard or something like that. It's actually Bernard from Day of the Tentacle.
Right.
Which is fun. But that person takes their job so seriously, because like there's like they explained I went to Snucky U. I learned all there is to being a staff member at Snuckies. I can open any jar in the country. And the thing you realize the more you get older is that there are actually people like that. There are people that have invested their time and their life in things like that, and they do not consider it a waste. I don't consider that a waste for them if that's what the joy they get from it. But I mean, like, there are people like that. The game inadvertently, I guess, like taught me to appreciate people like that. It taught me to appreciate, you know, people that would bother to create these like weird twisted tourist traps, like a giant ball of twine, you know?
Yeah. I think there's this massive link there, as you said, about, you know, for me, it felt like, right, here's this world, here's all this crazy, weird stuff. And I probably considered myself kind of crazy and weird kid then as well. And just having that link as well was amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, I definitely at that point too, like I said, I was bullied a lot, and a lot of that was because I was, you know, kind of a weird kid. So it felt nice to have something to relate to.
And to celebrate the weirdness.
Exactly. Celebrating the weirdness. Unironically celebrating the weirdness. I think, you know, some of the things too I was bullied about was like just the simple, you know, schoolyard bully crap of like, I like this thing, and the bully is saying, that thing is stupid, and you deserve mockery for that.
Yeah.
And then Sam and Max Hit the Road comes out, and you have the two characters going to these like what can be considered very stupid things. Yeah. And just saying, I like this thing. I love this thing, actually. And not only I love this thing, but the road trip experience would not be complete without this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is why I love it. And just an unironic celebration of the thing. And I deeply appreciated that. And I deeply needed an influence like that when I was a kid.
Well, I feel like we could have done a whole episode on Sam and Max itself, but
we absolutely could have.
Yeah, I think we should stop there before, you know, we should let people go and find the game and hopefully play it and let us know what they think. And as we keep saying, celebrating the weirdness of the game.
I should say as well that if you want to play Day of the Tentacle and Sam and Max Hit the Road, those are available on GOG. So check those out. And Yakuza 0 is on consoles. I think it's PlayStation.
Yeah, so Robin, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and, you know, for me, for reinvigorating some of that kind of lost knowledge I had about these games and how impactful they've been. So thank you so much, and could you let our listeners know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, sure thing. So I mean, like, my main site is thethirstywench.com. Another big thing that I'm on is I am actually the co-host of the Ontario Craft Beer Guide, the podcast, which is a podcast I do with my co-host Jordan St. John. We talk about the beer industry here in Ontario, but also Canada, America, you know, all over the world, you know, when we can. We do a lot of interviews there as well, which is a lot of fun. You could find that on OntarioCraftBeerGuide.com. And I'm also on Twitter at The Thirsty Wench.
Amazing. So yeah, once again, Robin, thank you so much for joining me, and yeah, hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Robin LeBlanc, for joining me. I am 100% going on to GOG.com to download Sam & Max to relive those childhood memories. And I'll probably have to buy Day of the Tentacle while I'm there too. To find out who will be on next week's show and to keep up to date with any news, events and competitions, please make sure to follow us at Game Over Beer on Instagram and Twitter. Everything I'm doing at Game Over Beer is to help raise funds for mental health charities. So if you have a moment, please donate at coffee.com/gameoverbeer. That's ko-fi.com/gameoverbeer. Thank you for listening, and join me again next week as we Game Over Beer.